Here's the ribbon image, for instance. And to do the ribbon image, again, I went through and I just, traced an object. For the ribbon, it was actually too simple. I just went around and used the sketch tool, like we were talking about earlier, and literally traced the whole thing and freezed it and extruded it. And this is what the ribbon image looked like. The ribbon object was actually just...
There's the geometry of the object.
It was just a flat, sketched out, section, and then I just extruded it back. And with that bump map on there, it became really effective. And this is sort of a nice transitional piece.
Head back to the Photoshop thing for a sec so we can see the...
Which is that piece right there. And I used the actual image back on top of it as a bump map and sort of adjusted the bump a little bit. I mean, it looks really effective like that, but it's really simple.
Okay, the guy? The figure on the back?
Well, this object right here, the back plate, simply I just went through with the background image in there and just, basically did the thing where I drew out the shapes, and you can see the individual shapes here, pretty easily. I drew out, here's a big shape, here's another shape, here's another shape, here's another shape, here's another one, and just roughed it out and give it a little extrusion. Take it in and do a metaform, and it instantly makes sort of the shape for the back plate. And then I just mapped the image back on as a bump map, and it gave that all that extra detail that looked like detail. I mean,
Show the figure, Ken.
Now this was probably the most complex thing. This took me about, maybe, of the 3 hours, about an hour and a half. Maybe 2 hours to do it most. And again, this is a lot simpler looking than you'd expect. Again, I used the sketch thing and sketched out the shape along here and just extruded across. So the base of it is really simple. Then for this is sort of like a blending of almost everything. This is a box that I used just to fill in the back here. And then this is just another metaform piece. And again, this was just all this was a simple, drag out a box, bevel the sides across and pull them around. And again, the top is the one place where I use the meta balls, because doing a shape like this, even with metaform, would have taken a long time. But this was really simple. You can actually see pretty much where the balls were. I made an arm shape out of the meta balls. I made a head shape. I stuck it to a couple balls going this way and put a couple for the chest, and that was about it. And then just did the whole thing.
Is this the actual shape that's on the ship? Or
this is the actual object, yeah. There's no difference. The only difference was applying the bump map to the front of the thing.
Okay, so head back to Photoshop for a sec. You have the bump maps with you?
I do have the image that I used.
Yeah.
So here's the original images I used again.
And you actually used, this is the image here was the basis of what you used
for everything. Every single one of these was traced. I went in, loaded this in the background, traced the shapes out individually.
But then even when you went into Photoshop to create the bump maps, you use this as well.
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah, and because one of the things that's great is because you trace it and you do an automatic size for the background image. When you go to map it on, it maps on automatically the same size. So
right.
It's a real good way of cheating, so to speak.
And go to the main image of the ship just so we can see that detail once again. We saw the crappy objects you made.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they were really simple, but I mean they're just effective enough where you believe they're.
Get in closer on that guy, Kenny.
Days and days on it. I mean, again, this was just a ball, but all the little details in the hair. Up here. And the little eyes that indented a little bit, and the fuzziness on the beard there just sort of was enough to sort of bring it in. I also did a couple things, like for the stomach muscles here. All I did, basically bump mapping works as a light and dark image and applies a sort of a faked out displacement. So I just took a paintbrush and just did little dabs on the stomach muscles. And that was enough where it gave me that little bit of detail that I needed. And I kept it real soft, so that way it didn't, it wasn't a harsh transition or whatever.
It ended up looking like stomach muscles. It just looked. Looks like
Well, there was, I mean,
a bad disease right there.
Yeah, this transition was a little bit sloppy, but again, I was on a real-time budget, so I had to,
Right.
you know, really go through it quickly. If I use this as a bump map right now, there's a harsh transition between the light and the dark. And one of the things that's about the bump map that I wanted to happen is I wanted it to be a little subtle. So what I did is I took it and I blurred it a little bit. And then again, I added, you know, when I wanted some real specific detail, like little bumps in the stomach muscles. This is actually just the bump map straight right here. One of the things you can do in bump mapping that a lot of people don't know is you can overdrive the heck out of it. You can crank it up more than 100%. And these bump maps were like 300%, and that adds a lot. You know, when you're doing small detail, you know, it really ends up adding to a lot. And,
if you have a bump map greater than 100%, as you change angles, if the bump map's over 100%, it flips. So what was indented becomes outdented, I guess. But what was in was out, and what was out is in. And you can actually see that in a couple of shots in space. If you're looking for it, as it moves around the ship, suddenly at one point the bump maps all flip over. Now you have to watch it like 19 times, and you know the show wasn't canceled because of that. I think it might be there's not much you can do about it, because once you start to overdrive it past 100%, it gets weird.
this is primarily an example. I just wanted to show you an example of how crappy models can look really good, and how you can get away with a lot and not do a lot of work. And the fact is that he was just sitting there. He wasn't moving around. So I didn't have to worry about the geometry getting tweaked, or I didn't have to worry about how I was going to animate. All I had to do was go metaball, metaball, metaball. I used a planer for the front here, and then I selected the sides of these sides right here. And I had these as separate ones, so it had a little bit of side detail in there also. But that was about it. I kept it really simple. And this front part here, I think, was also mapped from the side. The good thing now is you've got multiple textures. And if I had multiple textures when I did this, you could do both, you know, at the same time.
And we'll be showing some of those examples over and over in a second. Okay, let's pick up with metanerbs.
Metanerbs is very similar to metaform to a large extent, except for it has one huge advantage. You can actually see what you're doing as you're doing it. This is a metanerbs object that I did a couple days ago.
How long did this take you to make?
About 2 days or
Okay.
two 8-hour days or whatever, which is a pretty long time. But you know, I mean, it's pretty detailed. And again, let me you know, simplify this a little bit. Now here's the simple model, and it starts looking a lot less complex when I start doing this. But I can show you how I went through and sort of built this. First, I created a neck object, which is just a cylinder. It was just a disc, and I sort of extruded it out a little bit. It had 3 segments. And I just took the sections and bent them.
Do you want to show that? But just show how you do the neck. Just create.
Yeah. Now again, I have the tendency to work sloppy, and the reason why is because you can. You rough out something. You have a wonderful tool called undo, and then
Make the object.
watch what happens. I'll click. Let's say I do a disc here. Now it's not perfect. It's not even centered. It's kind of misshapen. And let's say I want to have this perfectly round. I made it, I undid it, I go back to numeric. I can clean it up now because it saves, when I do the undo, it saves the last information I just did, which is really nice. So I can go in and do something and see how it looks first, and then go in and clean it up and go, okay, it should be centered, you know, 0, 0, 0, and it should be, you know, exactly, you know, 75 by 115, you know, millimeters. And then, you know, there's a more perfect, you know, thing, and it's centered and everything. You know, I sort of work in a more free-form state and then clean up later, just because you get work done faster, it's more gratifying, and you know whether things are going to work or not. So let me extrude the neck out first of all.
This is something. This technique is going to come up as he does the dinosaur later too. You're going to see a similar thing. This is what he was talking about when he's talking about extruding the neck out. So he's just making a multi-segmented extrusion.
Disc, basically, yeah.
Yeah, more than one.
And then some of the tools I use a lot of to modify this type of stuff, to get the shape.
Use them and I'll talk about it.
Okay.
Because we're not going to get through everything if you're talking. Really.
Okay.
Okay, so basically he's just picking the top, doing a rotate, moving those over. And he's just going to go through the different sections and do the whole thing this way. And so again, a lot of times you get into these more complex shapes. See, if people see like a dinosaur neck or something like that. This is exactly the same thing he's going to do later when we get into the dinosaur. In fact, we won't even have to do it. You're seeing it now, so we won't even have to do it then. This is where, and again, you're going to see he ends up using tools like magnet and even vortex and stuff like that sometimes. It's just ways of really shaping the mesh here, really playing around with the geometry. Magnet is just doing a move, but in a limited area. And like I say, even tools like vortex or something like that end up being very useful to just push in parts. Vortex is one of those tools that it doesn't come up that much normally, but if you watch the way Ken works in a few objects, he ends up using vortex or even poles sometimes, just as a way of doing something with points in a quicker way, grabbing a whole bunch of points and then playing around with them. So he's just getting that real basic neck shape. And again, I just always think it's better to sort of see this stuff. This is the thing he was explaining before about taking a basic disc. It's already looking like, if you were to look at the object now, it's easy to see now, okay, it's basically a disc that he's extruded and done stuff with. But if you're just looking at the basic shape, you'd go, that's something weird.
Now again, luckily, with a creature, for instance, I'm working on I can mirror it. It can be copied over on the other side. I mean, it's basically the same on both sides. So because I've got like this side of the neck worked out pretty well, and I've got that sort of, the big, thick, neck, shoulder part coming out of there, I can select these useless parts, cut them out, and then I'm going to do a little cleanup work, as I was talking about before. Now I want to mirror this on the other side, so I want it to be exactly the same. So I'll just select these points and do something called a set value, and this will zero all of these points. It'll force them all to a particular value. So I'm going to make it in the Y. I'm just going to do it to 0, and it'll drop them all to 0. And that way, when I multiply them over, they're perfectly mirrored. And then again, merge points because I just multiplied it.
And just again, the set value there takes whatever point you've selected, and along any of the 3 axes, it puts it to exactly the mathematical position you want it in. So it is very, very handy for doing cleanup kind of work and everything like that.
And I showed you the sketching out the overall shapes in the gun before, and how that sort of worked, and then figuring out how they're connected later. I do that on a lot of my objects, including the complex ones like this.